the cloud. I should say that Scotty is taking a rest tonight because he had a root canal done today. So he said he won't be here. And Hyomin also sent me an email saying he's traveling this week and won't be able to be at the meeting and probably won't be responsive by email this week also.
Root canal, sympathy.
Yes.
Sympathy.
Well, let's get started. Welcome to the October 5th, 2021 session of Tangerine SDR and Hamside technical session. My name is Dave, KV0S, and this week I've been chugging away trying to learn about multicast on networking on a Raspberry Pi, which is quite an adventure. So I'm still working on it. We'll see, maybe in a week or two, I'll have it figured out. My main advisor, he sent me several emails and then I haven't heard from him for about a week and a half. So anyway, so next on the list, we have Nathaniel, W2NAF. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
So I've been quite busy this week. I had Jonathan Rizzo come over to my house on Saturday, and we're working on trying to get the ground magnetometer and VLF receiver into my house before the cold weather sets in. I know this has been a long time coming. We actually went out, ordered Conduit, and we set a line. So we're planning on putting the magnetometer and VLF antennas out at this tuft over there. And so we drew this line on the grass, and there's Jonathan. And there's me, and there's the line. I think I have another picture of it going. Yeah, and there's looking the other way.
Oh,
so
back to the house.
Back to the house. So it's about 225, 250 foot run. And the power lines come in over here and then go underground. So there's really no nearby above ground power, which makes it for a very quiet site. And then back here, it's just, 6,000 acres of state game land, basically.
Okay.
So it should be good. So this Thursday, the trencher, we're renting a trencher. It's supposed to arrive, and Jonathan's going to help me trench it. And then the conduit's also supposed to arrive at the house, and hopefully we'll make some progress over the next week.
Well, very good. Sounds like a productive few days.
Yeah.
So next on the list, we have Dave, KD0EAG. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I've been working on code and something else. I can't remember what. Oh, Raspberry Pis. Decided I better have some spares, and so that's been taking my time. Other than that, not much. Over to you then.
Okay. Next on the list, we have Dev, KC3PVE. Go ahead, Dev.
Hello, good evening, everyone. We have started our week in a positive note. I've begun to write my results into a paper, and I've also discussed with my colleagues about a possible hypothesis of the observations we have made. I think we are seeing large scale structures in all the observations that we have made here. Observations made by the radar receiver here in Scranton, and also TC observations, and also Superdan observations. So I think they are coming well. Trying to dig deeper into the science story and collating them and combining them is the next task that I would be involved in coming months, I think. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Next on the list, we have Jim, K4BSE. Go ahead, Jim.
Good evening, all. Well, let's see, not a lot of progress around here. My Grape 1 has stopped producing data as of yesterday, and I got to figure out what's going on there. May have an antenna problem. I'll check that. I did get a new toy for my ham station. I got a LP 700 digital station monitor, and having a lot of fun with that, and trying to get familiar with its features, and got a long way to go on it. That's about it from here. Back to Ned.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Dan in for XWE. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Dave, and good evening all. Worked on scripts this last week. I kind of went back through all the ones I'd done. I think I've done about 20 of them so far, and upgraded everything to the latest version of the code that they were made to install. They all seem to be working well. So if anybody wants to take a look at it, it's GitHub/my callsign. And they were certainly welcome to use them. Right now they install on a Raspberry Pi. You're running Raspberry Pi OS, Ubuntu Mate, and also Ubuntu for the 64-bit version of Ubuntu for ARM. And that seems to be the latest and greatest kind of standard thing. And I think Mate is actually going to go away with the next go around of revisions. Anyway, that's about it from here. Back to you, Dave.
Well, sounds good. Next on the list, let's see, would be Dana, K8YUM. Go ahead.
Good evening, folks. I'm not involved with this project at all at present, but thought I'd just tune in and see what's going on.
Well, fine business. And if you find it interesting, please come back. And if you find something you want to work on, please volunteer.
Okay,
So,
thank you. I'll just mute my mic and sit back and watch.
okay. Next on the list, let's see. Keep track of who I already talked to. David, N1 HAC. Go ahead, David.
What? You don't have it memorized yet?
Well, the names keep jumping around, and that's what.
I can help you with that. It stands for no one has a clue.
Yes.
Keeps me humble.
Yes.
We got a number of things going on. I keep picking away at the Max 10 board and seeing if I can find out its idiosyncrasies. We're playing with a number of things here with Raspberry Pi, but trying to get an RSP Duo receiver to behave on it, and talk to some of the newer GPS DOs that we're trying to incorporate, which are, as I said to our software guy, GPSs are always fickle. I haven't found one yet that always behaves the way I expect it to. But, oh, and I had one question regarding the magnetometers. As I understand from watching the design, the new version still operates the same as the old version does. And I'm wondering if there's a reason to get a hold of one to test it out.
My understanding from Scotty is that they should behave as the last batch did. Now, I have not seen any of these. And so if you can get one, you're doing better than I.
Scotty was going to mail them last week.
And the
Okay.
week before.
Yes.
I don't
And
know
the
if I'm on the
week
official
before that.
list, but I can test them.
Okay.
And
So,
I did get one
Yeah,
from
well.
of his previous
yeah,
version.
we all have
That's what
the
I have.
D rev.
Right. I've got one of them, but
Yes.
It was mostly about moving things around on the board,
yeah, I
you
know
know,
it's a
just
form
to
factor
make
thing.
it fit.
Right. Very good. Back
Shortly after those get tested, we're planning to make a big run of those. If they test clean.
Right, but if you need someone to test it, I'm able to do that.
Okay. Next on the list is let's see, David Waugh.
Hello, everyone. I wasn't here last week. I was in New Jersey. I guess as Nathaniel knows, the Garden State, visiting my folks and helping them clean out their house. And it's a good time to get rid of Aunt Gertrude's teapot, because it's never going to get easier to get rid of it, and your kids may not want to deal with it. But that's it. Back to Matt.
Well, I appreciate the task of cleaning houses. So anyway, next on the list is Gary, WAF8A or AF8A. Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
good
you
evening,
got-
everyone. Spent a little
Sorry.
time over the weekend on the ham side of Hamside, putting the WW0 WWV call sign on the air for the 102nd anniversary of the license being issued out there in Colorado. So 19 QSOs and a lot of them by straight key, which is a chore with that call sign, but still a lot of fun. Back to net.
Well, fine business. And let's see. Next on the list is James, KG4DSG. Go ahead, James.
Good evening, Dave and the group. Not much here. I stumbled across something the last week. There's a new SDR software UI that's been released, version 1. I'll put it in the chat. It's called SDR++. It's cross-platform, pretty bare bones at this point, but it may be something interesting for this group. Back to the net.
Yes, I took a look at that, and it's built on top of GNU Radio. So it uses the libraries from GNU Radio. So next on the list, let's see, Jay, WB8SBI. Go ahead, Jay.
Okay, waiting for the camera. There we go. Well, good evening, all of my fraternal brothers out there in amateur radio. Not a whole heck of a lot new or really interesting to report this week. So the only non-ham interesting thing to report is this weekend coming up, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra starts the 2021-22 classical season.
Wow.
So otherwise, nothing much going on here. 7-3 to all.
That sounds good. Next on the list is Joe, W7LUX. Go ahead, Joe.
Evening, Dave, and everyone on the group here. Been very, very busy working on a nasty QRN problem at the County Emergency Operations Center, so haven't gotten a whole lot done on the grape. A couple of questions for the group. Does anybody have a telephone number ending in 4499? And also, Tom, is your call W3GXV?
No, it's M5EG.
IDG? Okay, thank you.
No, November 5 Echo Golf.
Got it. Thank you, Tom. And then Nathaniel, my sympathy. They just dug a gas line at my neighbor's place, dug a trench for it, and the pile of rocks is unbelievable. I hope you have better luck there. I mean, I don't know where they're going to put all these rocks. I think they're going to have to haul them away. I live on a rock pile. Anyway, thanks, Dave.
What, do you live in Vermont?
Actually, northern Arizona, and we've got all sorts of stuff. But yeah, understand it's rocky up there too.
Yeah, this Genesis story for Vermont is in 6 days God created the universe. On the 7th day, he threw rocks at Vermont.
Oh, okay. A few asteroids now and then.
I'm really, really, really hoping there's not many rocks in that field.
You wouldn't believe the mess of my neighbors.
You need David to come and look at your field.
Yeah. Well, I'll let
David
you know.
Waugh.
Yes, Steven. I'll let you know next Monday what happens.
Yeah, I
Good
don't
luck.
think in New Jersey you're not going to have that much of a problem.
This
You're
is
in northern.
This is
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
What's that?
This is Pennsylvania in the Poconos.
Oh, I thought you were in New Jersey. Oh no, that's
I'm from New Jersey originally. I'm
Oh,
from
well.
Bloomfield.
that happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, you'll find out.
Yeah. As I said, I will let you know next week.
Okay, well, let's go on the list. Next one is Jonathan, KC3 EEY, and it looks like you had a good weekend of work.
Hi, everybody. Yes, we Nathaniel and I, we ended up going to three different stores: Home Depot, Lowe's, and a local hardware store. We got pretty much just about everything we need. We ordered the conduit. We set up the rental for the trencher, all the fittings and everything else. We also, as Nathaniel showed you, we were able to trace out the trench that we're going to dig. Nathaniel had a great idea of somehow tracing it out and trying to get it as straight as possible. This way, as we're trenching, we know exactly where we're going and we're not going to make any mistakes and veer off to the left or right. So that was a great idea. And we ended up getting the line very straight. And me and Nathaniel are still kind of admiring how straight that line is. But so yeah, on Thursday I'll be helping him with the trenching. That's our main goal, is to get everything trenched, and the conduit will be coming, and if we have time, we're going to start putting that in, yeah, so we're making pretty good progress on that. I mentioned last week I finally got my audio injector isolated sound card. This weekend I was finally able to actually get it installed on the Raspberry Pi. What I had to do was the console port, the UART, wasn't wired to the pass-through header. So there's the Raspberry Pi header that's on the sound card that plugs into the Pi, and then there's a pass-through header if you want to attach any other hats. So the UART was not connected through for whatever reason. So I had to add jumpers, and I did. The GPIO pins that I was worried about that might be used and might interfere with what I'm using them for now, the indicator LEDs. I also jumped those to the pass-through header as well. Everything works fine. I set up all the options in ALSA, and I get a very clean GPS pulse per second on the left channel of the sound card. It's actually very clean. I'm having trouble getting the timing working. There's I get timing errors every now and then. And I'm trying to investigate where they're coming from. The pulse per second pulse, it's about 80% of the sound card's range. So that's where it should be. But I'm not really sure exactly what's causing those timing errors. But the oscillator itself, the clock is very stable. I was looking at this at the timing messages, and there's not much drift, which is really good. But I just have to figure out the source of those errors. That's all I have. Back to the net.
Well, fine business. And next on the list is Michael, AA8K. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, thank you. Greetings to everyone listening to the conversation. Back to you, Dave.
Fine business. And again, last but not least is Tom McDermott, N5EG. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dave. It's been a busy week. Been working on the dev board and the software. I've made some interesting discoveries. Flashing the FPGA does wipe out the MAC address and the serial number, but there's a utility to put it back in, and found that. And the application that we're going to try to port uses a different place in flash and a different flash chip to store the same information. Thirdly, some MAC addresses which are perfectly legal don't work, and some do. I haven't figured out how to determine those. And we talked last week offline and decided to focus all our efforts on Quartus 20.1. And so I've been working on the kernel panic there. And I think I've made some headway. I've done a lot of C code in my life, and I've never heard of the double pound token pasting operator before. And it turns out that we're appearing to have macro expansion errors in the code. The code is heavily tokenized with macros. And so I'm trying to track those down and see if I can get that set. That's more positive development because it's in the compiler. There's error messages which lead the way. So if it's something like that, that'd probably be pretty good news. So that's it for the week.
Well, fine business. And unless I missed somebody, I think we've called on everybody. So we're open for general discussion.
Quick question about SDR++. Does that run on the Raspberry Pi? I'm not up enough on the operating systems to tell from its webpage.
They say it's cross-platform and can be built from source, but I have not dealt with it yet.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like it would have to be built.
David, I sent you an email earlier this week. Do you know which model and brand of either SSD or hard drive you use with your AM Doppler system?
Yes. Trying to remember now. I'll look it up.
Thanks. Because I sent Bill Engelke a external Seagate 8 terabyte desktop hard drive for recording the IQ data from the Grape 1 with his image that's running GNU Radio. And apparently it worked for a few months and then quit like last week. So we were wondering if you had something more reliable.
Yeah, I'll take a look. It's yeah, I'll let you know in a couple minutes.
Thank you. Tom, did you have any more luck with the Quartus 20.1?
No, still working on it. I've rebuilt the whole package, and some of the code has changed. I did find an errata on a couple of the building blocks in it that requires modifying the source code in a few places, timers and a couple of other things. So I'm still working on trying to get it built. It expands some macros wrong, and I'm trying to track down what's going on with the macro expansions and token pasting. So still working it. I've spent probably the last 3 or 4 days on it, pretty happy.
So it's still not going.
No, it's not, but hope springs eternal. There's always one more thing you can try.
So Tom, are you building it in Linux?
No, it's a C application. The software that comes with Quartus lets you instantiate a processor and all of the peripherals for the processor, and then lets you assign the addresses for all the peripherals in memory, things like that. And then you generate what's called a BSP, a board support package, and it generates all the drivers with all the addresses defined per the layout that you did in the FPGA. And then you can link in your app to that board support package. And in theory, it runs. It's a very heavily macro processed thing that's going on to try to find it. It turns out that they had not updated the example since Quartus 17. And some of the macros in hardware are now different between Quartus 20 and Quartus 17. So I rebuilt all of that stuff because the software libraries in 20 don't support the old peripherals. And I'm chasing down some of the expansions that define those things right now. But I did find a couple of errata documents on the web, and those have been helpful. One of them extends a timer to make auto negotiation of 1 gig links work. There's things like that that I'm trying to track down.
Well, we were told by the guys at Intel that they built Quartus in CentOS and then ported it to Windows. So I don't know if that's creating some of the issues or whether it's irrelevant.
I have it installed on Ubuntu 20.04, and Quartus seems to work fine on that. The software development environment was dropped from the Quartus installer package from Quartus 17 and after. And so you have to do a separate install of the Eclipse package.
Right.
And that required a lot of work with symlinks to rewire. I had to go figure out how to rewire Java into that package, bypassing all of the normal Java packaging that comes installed and kind of rewiring it to a different Java package. And then I had to do a bunch of symlink stuff to get the debugger to work because it used some different packages, and it had hard coded the shared object library numbers. And so I symlinked my way out of those.
Yeah.
And got the debugger working. So I think it's not related to the CentOS. The Windows installer can't synthesize the DDR3 memory controller. That's a bug apparently in all Windows versions, but it does work on Ubuntu 20.04. And so I think some of the macro stuff was changed between what was bundled in Quartus pre-version 17 and the separate install you've got to go track down from the web now. And I think that they work a little differently. As I mentioned earlier, they use what's called a token pasting operator in macro expansions. And that one that's a new one on me. I just found this afternoon. I've never seen that before. It lets you define a defined name out of a bunch of subdefined names from the various module pieces. And so I'm trying to track down what's going on there. But like I said, that's better than having the runtime blow up and just print, kernel panic. Those are hard to track down. If the compilers got a hold of it, they're easier to find.
Those token pasting operators were much beloved of the especially cruel type of teaching assistant that ran, who usually didn't know much about the rest of the language, but liked to make quizzes about those.
Yeah, I had never seen that before. They are used extensively in the code for building up, the names of registers for these modules. You could put in 3 of a particular kind of function, and you have to give them all different names. And so the preprocessor figures out how to identify sub-registers in a peripheral by compounding the name you gave it with the names of the registers. It's doing things like that. good thing about 20 is the tools, at least on Ubuntu, seem to be quite a bit more stable. And so if we can get this thing up and running on 20.1, I think it's going to make life easier for a whole lot of folks.
I'm just guessing, but my best guess is that probably 20% of the users use the Linux version and 80% of the users use the Windows version.
Yeah.
And it's developed in Linux. So it's really a bass-ackwards way of doing things.
Yeah, we know in the Windows version that I've tried on 16 was pretty good, but it does have a couple of fatal bugs. And so I spent about 3 or 4 weeks hopping. I build one part in 16, port it over to 20, build another part of it, backport it from 20 to 16. I was jumping versions. And there's some mounting incompatibilities trying to do that. So it's what it reminds me of is that the company that produced it was kind of in the startup mode, where they really didn't have the developers and the funds to build all the tools themselves. And they went out and put together a collection of various different tools from different places. And so the UIs are radically different. There's a lot of glue code. You know, the terminology and names for things are different between the various tools. And I think they tried for, with great economy to try to put together a complete tool suite.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I mean, Altera was, for what it was a shoestring operation.
Yeah, so that might be a conclusion that's warranted on how things got put together. So the problem is, as the tools have aged and gotten out of version, it's increasingly difficult to pull all the pieces together in some semblance where the versions that you can get from the web all work together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To change the subject a little bit, if there's a lull, Mike Naruto was messaging me. Mike, you were saying that you run a ground wire outside of the conduit through the trench.
That's correct. I bury an additional ground wire, a bare copper wire, and tie that into the ground system.
And just to make sure the ground is equal on both sides.
Actually, it's to enhance my ground system.
Okay.
Lower the impedance to the earth.
That would be a good thing to do. I agree.
Is it?
The plastic tape is the warning tape that says like buried electric line or buried gas line. You can get those at the big box stores.
Okay. And you put that on top of it?
You put the conduit down, put some gravel or sand or soil, and then put the tape above so that if somebody's excavating, hopefully they see the tape first and not your conduit. You get a big roll, it's really cheap.
Yeah. I'll have to do another run to the hardware store.
What gauge do you run, Michael?
As big as I can get. Like number 8 if I can.
Okay. I've used for shorter runs, I've used some number 4 solid copper, but that doesn't get real cheap, especially these days.
Well, some of them have number 10 in the trench. I ran 2 bare number 10s. That's because I had leftover broadcast radial coils of copper.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
So if I can get 200, 300 feet of bare number 8 copper wire, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's it puts a dent in your pocketbook.
Yeah, I've already done that.
Could that cause any interference? I'm not a grounding expert. Actually, I'm not an expert in anything, but would having that extra conductor there potentially cause any issues with
Well,
the
probably
cable run?
not any more than the shield of the LAN cable does.
But that's not in contact with the ground.
Oh,
I mean, I don't know. I'm.
That's a good question.
I have no idea.
I wouldn't think so. That is pretty much standard practice. It's a good one, I think.
I got a weird question. You said that run was 250 feet?
Nathaniel?
Yeah,
Nathaniel?
yes, it's 250 feet.
I'd be concerned about ground loop currents. Most electrical code standard says ground rods need to be within 6 feet of each other. Be interesting to put a current meter on there and see if you got a ground loop.
Along the whole thing?
Well, if you bury the wire, yeah. I don't know if it would affect anything. But a 200-foot run, well, it's going to be buried. You probably wouldn't have to worry about RF.
Yeah. So right now I'm planning on the current plan is to do the conduit, and then inside the conduit, 2 runs of shielded direct burial Cat 6, 3 runs of flooded RG6, and an extra pull line. I think that's all we're planning on doing right now. I might have some extra rotor cable in the garage that I might throw a line of that in there too if I can find that rotor cable.
What size conduit are you using, Nathaniel?
2-inch.
Mm-hmm. Where did you get your conduit?
I ordered it from Lowe's. So they're supposed to deliver it.
Nathaniel?
Yeah.
General point. Are you going to have in your conduit, and forgive me if you've already mentioned this, just the provisions for straight power and ground, just either 12 volts or 120 or something like that, inside there in case you ever need it?
No, I wasn't planning on that.
Yeah, inside of a in a shielded pair. So if for some time in the future you need 12 volts at the other end or 120 volts inside a fully shielded.
Mike is shaking his head.
AAK is shaking his head.
Yeah,
So, gotta have
120 volts can't share the conduit with signaling.
Oh, it's against the code.
The big no.
But what about a rotor control?
Conduit.
What about putting a rotor control cable in there?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay,
because 12 volt or whatever you want. But
I might have an extra spool of rotor control cable in my garage. I can't remember, but if I do, I might be able to just throw that in there.
Yeah, my thought was that at the other end, if you ever need 12 volts, you need a 12 volt supply for something. Now, granted, if it's over a long distance, you got to worry about voltage drop. But otherwise, if you're only going to get maybe a volt or something like that, or a couple volts voltage drop across the run, then okay, you don't use it now, but you'll have it. It's there.
Yeah.
Well, he has thought ahead by putting the extra pull rope in there, so that's good for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, future proof it.
Yeah. I imagine pulling more stuff through that is not going to be easy.
That's kind of interesting that I did a search on the warning tapes. They've now got a 1,000-foot roll of buried warning tape that can be found with a metal detector.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to locate the line, the tape will actually, well, your conduit won't do it if it's plastic.
Yeah, but if he's got a lot of wire in there, there's a lot of metal inside that plastic.
Yeah, but I don't know. Does copper wire set off a metal detector? I guess it would.
I thought that warning tape was only required if you had high voltage.
Well, yeah, but if you want to keep somebody from digging up your conduit, it'd be a good idea.
I still throw it in my trenches.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody building a ditch the other way someday might dig up your.
At least they pause.
Find out where it goes.
I have two questions for the group. One is about, have most people found the standard power supply supplied that comes with the Pi that was recommended with the Grape 1? Is that an adequate power supply and low noise enough? And the other question, and I realize Jules and other people aren't here, but was about, I probably shouldn't ask two questions at the same time, but about the magnetometer data format. And right now it's in streaming JSON, or you can have it as tab delimited. And I realize that the Grape and Tangerine groups may have different ideas about what data format they want to use, but has there been more thought on what the ultimate data format will be, and various headers and whatnot? I realize those are two separate questions.
I think the ultimate format that gets stored in the database, I don't think there's been a totally final decision on it, but the main idea has been the magnetometer people would supply the data in this form to Bill Engelke, and then he would decide how it would be stored in the final database.
But a lot of the data you're planning to put into digital RF, right?
Yeah, but not the magnetometer data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No.
that's the alternative format that's
Right.
part of it.
The digital RF is only for data that really warrants having high data rate digital RF type of data. So if you have data coming off any sort of IQ data, anything that's coming from fast sampled, like the VLF data coming off of the sound card, Grape data coming off of the sound card, it makes sense to put that raw data into digital RF. It doesn't make sense to do that to the magnetometer data that's being sampled once a second with only three axes. I think that's just fine to keep in an ASCII format or a compressed ASCII format, like a CSV file.
I have not had any reason to consider doing anything else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and Dave, where did this, and I'm not, where did the streaming JSON format come about? Because there must be a reason for it, and I just don't know what the reason is.
Well, there's an explanation for it. It is, each individual sample is a JSON object. It's a JSON formatted object. Now, if we were to call the entire data returned in a day's log file officially to be JSON, and for all the parsers to treat it correctly, some will deal with what we've got as it is, but by and large, it's not really proper to call it JSON, because they're ultimately a single JSON file. It is a single JSON object, and it can have all manner, any number of sub objects, but you have you just declared an array, but you can't guarantee that you can put a closing tag on the data file after 24 hours. You can't guarantee it'll be there. And so a lot of the parsers, if it's not, then they're going to gag. And so it seemed a lot better to make a post processor that would add a beginning and ending square bracket or something if that's wanted. And then it would be proper JSON, a single JSON object. But it's just the nature of JSON, and the the fact that we are collecting data over a day-long period, and as a single unit, it just needs, it's and otherwise the format has huge advantages for us.
Oh, and Dave, I wasn't being critical at all. I was
No.
'cause I had known about JSON format, and then I had never seen the streaming JSON, and then that threw me for a loop. I figured out how to deal with it, but I was just curious as to what the
streaming JSON is my terminology. It's just what I called it when it occurred to me that I couldn't reliably write a true JSON file.
Well, I actually found that term independently trying to convert the data, because I found these in R, these JSON interpreters, and they just said, yeah, I'm not going to deal with this. And then I looked up the format more, and I mean, it really is called streaming JSON. And
is it? Okay.
And
well, great minds think alike, I guess. But
it is really common if you're going to plot stuff in a web browser.
Is it?
Because JavaScript, that's what it's expecting.
Okay, no, and I was just curious. It was, I mean, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah,
I guess.
I understand that I understand the difficulty, and I've really meant to make a little button where you could download a day's logs, but it would stream it through a little Python script as it downloaded to make it proper JSON for a whole day.
Or you can just delete the -J and just get it in tab delimited format.
Yeah, well, I don't like that very much.
Okay.
I really don't like that. It's not tab delimited. It's a kind of one of the variations of CSV, but it's it's comma separated values, but that's really unreliable, crappy data, crappy way to store data.
Okay.
Because you don't know, if you lose some, you don't know what part you've lost or how much, or what you've got, and it's hard to reestablish. Pretty much have to throw the rest of it away, I think.
That makes sense.
It's easy to convert this to that if that's what you prefer. And
that's what I've been doing, is converting it to whatever flavor.
Yeah. But there's no standard for CSV, or there's no usable standard for CSV, and it was used for about 20 years before anybody thought about standardizing it. And even then, and so I think it's really, personally, I think it's a trash format. It's just for Excel people. But
well, not just for Excel people. It's been used in R and S+ for 40 years.
That doesn't make it good.
But it is a common science format.
Well, JSON's not perfect, but it's better. you know, and we have the bandwidth to do it. I mean, yes, there's a price to be paid. It beats XML, which would have the same problems in our usage, and JSON's, you know, if we wanted to send back binary bits, there are some variants of it that people have worked on, but I think it's serving this purpose pretty well, because the volume of data is so low. It's, you know, and really what I would, this is not for this project at all, but longer term, I would really like to treat the magnetometer as if it were the way a GPS is treated, you know, where the data, even in the data strings, that in standard format, the default modes, returns are regarded as complete at the sensing device, and the whole packet is sent time-stamped from the sensor, so that there aren't these the potential for timing issues. You know,
but at some point, there's also going to be the need for more header data, like what is the orientation of your magnetometer, and what sample rate and whatnot are you using it? And I suppose maybe when the magnetometer is fully matured and integrated into the grape and tangerine, there'll just be one. I mean, I guess I hope there'll be just one setting we're using.
Well,
but right now, you know, people have things at different orientations, and
yeah. Well, the grape folks have a whole strategy for all that. John Gibbons has done a really good job of planning, you know, of laying out every bit of metadata, at least that concerned him at the time. I found it, I started to try to follow his specification and found it was unworkable for the magnetometer. And it seemed better just to go ahead and do what we needed. And yes, planning to have another day file every day, or actually every time the system perceives the data collection to have been interrupted, to write another parameter file with enough naming information to be able to, you know, create a relation with the main data file, so that you know when an interruption occurred, when it was put, data collection was resumed. This would be these would be separate files that would just get uploaded along with the other one, you know, with the main data body.
And that makes sense. And honestly, I mean, from what I've been doing with the magnetometer and the joules and with you guys is more been looking at various settings. So the format for me at this point is sort of, well, I can deal with whatever format. But then I was talking to someone else who just got a magnetometer, and he's like, well, why is it in this format? And I'm like, I don't know, that's what the cool kids are doing. So, you know,
well, yeah,
but no, that makes perfect sense. And I wasn't, it wasn't a critique. It was
no, I'm not taking it that way, but it's not that I haven't thought about all of this stuff in some depth. It's just that it takes a long time to implement a lot of these things. And because this is where it gets fussy. Reading the data, diddling the parameters, that's the easy part. You know, configuration and repeatability on the software and just having it be robust, that's where it's really a pain.
Yeah, no, that's.
And I get in to where I lose track of everything, and I kind of have to rip stuff out and start over again, because it gets I get so much going round and round. And I'm trying to stick to that right now. That's what but the plan is to have, yes, additional metadata there, independent of the primary file. I mean, not independent, but essentially related by file name and log location. And then somebody can pick that up with whatever they feel is useful. You know, if need be, I can write in the end some Python scripts that would pull together a whole day's data and insert this preferred form of missing data identifiers, but I don't want to do that at the time it's being collected, because it's hard, it's hard to undo it if you make a mistake. And but at least all the relevant data about which way the thing's pointing and what's, what temperature is it, and what, all that really belongs in some auxiliary related. If it was a database, it'd be in related tables, but and so someone could pull them up and put them in a properly normalized schema like that. But I don't want to do that at this stage. Hope that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense. I'm not an expert in any of this, so it sounds reasonable, and obviously there's an explanation for why it's all.
I don't know what anyone else would want it, what format people want it in, but except for you can tell I have a certain bias against CSV, but
yeah. Dave, I just want to, I've used CSV to do some error reporting and collection about 10 years ago. And you have to remember, in North America, we use a decimal point to separate the integer part from the fractional part of a number, 3.4. Well, in Europe, they use a comma.
Yes.
3.4. That
I worked in
messes
Finland
up your
and
comma-separated variable file a bit. And so I think a semicolon is also acceptable. But I had to go in and look at the country of origin and then go mess with the file so I could get something that could actually be usable.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Well, in truth, all of the values I'm reporting back through JSON in JSON files are in fact strings and not numbers at the time they're being handed back. Now, people can use a locale to convert that into something they like to look at, and usually the JSON parsers are locale sensitive. CSV is kind of who knows. So it's, I mean, you just got to pick one and go with it. But it's not a religious thing, but I tried to do it more than one way at a time to begin with, and the code got hard to look at. It's C after all. It's not C++ or anything else. Gets to be a lot of if-thens.
Well, I need to step out, so I'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
73
Thank
Dave.
you.
See you next week.
73.
73, everybody.
Good night, all.
Night.
Night.
Is anyone sticking around?